Welcome to the Azure Stack HCI Show. Welcome, Manfred. Nice to see you.
Hi, Sven. I'm looking forward to our show today. We had a short break, I think 4 weeks ago.
6 weeks. 6 weeks. Passing by so fast. So what have we missed the last 6 weeks? A lot of?
We will not miss anything because we will cover it today. So there were some announcements that especially changed the way how Azure Stack HCI is deployed. Not fundamental, but it's easier now. And we will cover this today in the show.
That sounds good. So we are talking about news in the release 24.05. But before we start with this, I would like to remind you that we have a LinkedIn channel that is focusing on Azure Stack HCI news and related content. The group is called Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk, and here you can see the screenshot. So if you go to LinkedIn and look for Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk, I'm sure you will find it. So if you follow this group, you will not miss anything. And you can see on the right top side that we have 989 members so far. So 2 are missing until we reach the 1,000 bar. So it would be perfect if you follow this group maybe today, and we can celebrate our 1,000 members. And then I would like to remind you that I have a website that is focusing on Azure Stack HCI as well. It's Sven Langenfeld-techtalk.com. So at the end of the session, I will show the website link again. And the reason why I'm showing you this website is to demonstrate that you will find everything I have about Azure Stack HCI on this website combined. So for example, you can see there's a What's New in Azure Stack HCI button. And if I press that button, then it will link directly to the news, the official Microsoft news channel of Azure Stack HCI. And if I go to the website again, you can see that there's a news section. And in this news section, I highlight the most relevant things from my perspective. And to be honest, I hope to hear or to see more announcements 2 weeks ago during the Microsoft Build event for Azure Stack HCI. And I will explain why, because, for example, some weeks ago at Hannover Messe in Germany, Cosmos Darwin posted this sneak peek thing. And we talked about that in one of the, I think in the last Azure Stack HCI show, that there's a kind of new Azure Stack experience for Windows IoT solutions. So very small footprint. And these are meant especially for manufacturing. And we wonder, oh, what does this have to do with Azure Stack HCI? Is there something in the pipe? But no announcement at Build. So I'm a little bit unhappy about that. The other 2 things I'm missing is an announcement about the update option for Azure Stack HCI from version 22H2 to 23H2. So this is what we're still missing, an official upgrade path. Nothing has been announced yet. So at the moment when something is officially available, it will be on my website. It will be in the Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk LinkedIn group, of course. But at the moment, nothing has been announced. And the third thing I'm missing is about Stretch Cluster. So Stretch Cluster is a feature we had in Azure Stack HCI. It was a unique feature in Azure Stack HCI compared to Hyper-V on Windows Server. And we learned from the announcement of Windows Server 2025 that Stretch Cluster will be available in the next version of Windows Server. But at the moment, in the existing release of Azure Stack HCI 23H2, it's no longer included. It's not supported. So we have a small gap. So the question now is, when will Stretch Cluster be back in Azure Stack HCI? And this announcement still is missing. But a lot of other things
But
are.
maybe let me add something here about
Yeah.
the stretch cluster thing, Sven, because it's absolutely correct that we don't have the stretch cluster at the moment in Azure Stack HCI and also not in Windows Server. In Windows Server, it's announced for the next version.
Mhm.
But stretch cluster means a specific technique to have a site redundancy. So
Mhm.
we switch to my screen, I will do this. I opened the technical documentation about it, how it works in Azure Stack HCI 2020 H2, so the previous versions, 2022 H2, the previous version. And it was a combination of storage spaces direct and storage replica, and there were some limitations in there. So if a customer wants to have a site redundancy, then the official stretch cluster is not available, as you mentioned. This is absolutely correct. But there are other technologies where we could configure a site redundancy. For example, Azure Site Recovery. Azure Site Recovery means that we are replicating our workload, so the virtual machines, to Azure or to another Azure Stack HCI cluster. Both is possible. It's possible from on-premises Azure Stack HCI to Azure Public Cloud, or it's possible from Azure Stack HCI 1 to Azure Stack HCI 2. And then we don't have the official stretched cluster. We have a supported configuration and we have site redundancy. So if one side fails, the virtual machines on the other side can be started, can be automated with Azure Site Recovery. And so we have one technology where we can have this site redundancy. And another thing is we could build virtual clusters. So if we have an Azure Stack HCI cluster inside one and another Azure Stack HCI cluster inside two, and maybe we are operating SQL Server on this Azure Stack HCI, then we could build a virtual SQL Server cluster across the sites to have redundancy. So this means we have a solution if a customer is looking for site redundancy on the workload level, on the VM level, where the solution is missing at the moment is doing it with the HCI stack with storage spaces direct itself. And I'm really looking forward when we have this, because we have two big questions about Azure Stack HCI today when I'm talking about it, when I'm presenting at workshops, at events. The first question is stretch cluster, and I'm always giving this answer. And for some customers, it's okay to have it on the workload level. Others want to have it on the storage spaces direct stack. And the second question, and you didn't mention it because it's not a technical thing, but so many customers are asking about multi-tenancy. So there are
Mhm.
many hosters in the market that are unhappy with what happened in the VMware Broadcom area, and they want to change, and they see the big advantage of Azure Stack HCI that we have this Azure Resource Manager based model, so they can solve several problems. They can use their Azure know-how to bring workloads to Azure Stack HCI and so on. But I think we mentioned this in the previous show that Azure Stack HCI does not allow, would be possible from the technical perspective, but the licensing does not allow to have this shared hosting where we have a machine or a cluster and we have several customers on it. It's possible to provide a dedicated Azure Stack HCI cluster starting with a single node as a hosted service, but this multi-tenancy is missing from the licensing perspective today.
Yeah, hopefully it's coming soon. I get these requests on a weekly basis. Yeah, we will see. We will see. But today we are going to talk about the announcement that has been made or the new
Yep.
features in Azure Stack HCI. And maybe you want to explain our audience what is the difference between the version 23H2, that's the current version of Azure Stack HCI, and the releases 24.05, 24.02, and so on. So what is the difference?
Yeah, the version, and I will bring maybe my screen up again. The version is that what everybody knows. The first version of Azure Stack HCI was the 20H2. This is where Microsoft introduced Azure Stack HCI in the first version, and it was more or less a new a Windows server in a server core installation with a dedicated SKU. So it was named Azure Stack HCI in those days already. But the only connectivity to Azure was some integration for billing purpose to send the cores to Azure. In Azure Stack HCI version 21H2, there were more Azure additions we could use on premises. We had this AKS support, we had extended connectivity to Azure, and then version 2022 H2 came up. This was the previous version. This was the version that supported stretch clustering. And in February this year, we had version 23 H2, or since February. And this is the major version till the next Azure Stack HCI version. I assume the name will be 24 H2, but this is not confirmed actually, but when you look at the naming, it was always the year and then H2, so I expect it will be 24 H2 again. This is the major release. This is the OS version. This is comparable to, let's say, this is Windows 10, and this is Windows 11 somehow. There we have also the situation. We have regular updates in the client operating system, but we also have several major versions. And in Azure Stack HCI, we have these major versions once a year. And in the 23 H2 version itself, we already had 3 updates that brought Azure Stack HCI to a new level. The first one was 23.11 release. This was started in the preview area. This was last year when Azure Stack HCI was still in the preview. So, and then with 23.11.2, it went general available. So this was the GA version. Then we had the 23.11.3, 23.11.4, 23.11.5. So nearly each month, a new version. And for sure, this has one focus to fix issues, to solve issues we have in the operating system. But when we look through the roadmap here with the releases, we can see that there are also enhancements. So for example, in 24.02, we had an expansion of the possible regions. We had changes in the deployment. We had new features in update management and so on. Mm-hmm. And these releases give us the ability that we receive new technologies in Azure Stack HCI, also between these major version changes we have once a year. And in the 24.05 version, you can see the list is very long, and we will go through this because we have a lot of major changes here. So far is fine, the difference between the version and the release? Yeah, so the release.
So the major releases are supported for, I think it's 6 months, usually, correct?
Usually, yes.
And how about the releases? Do I have to upgrade to all of them? Is there any support cycle?
Yeah, 2 important things. At the moment, we have the situation that 22H2 is supported until we have clearness about a migration from 2022 H2 to 23 H2. So it's absolutely correct what you said. When Microsoft published version 21 H2, I had 6 months to migrate from 20 H2 to 21 H2, and the same from 21 H2 to 2022 H2. At the moment, we have the situation, both versions, so the 2022 version and the 23 version are still supported. So both are still supported, and we don't have a support end that is defined for the previous version. Regarding the releases, we have the situation, it's not required that we install each of these releases, because you can see within these releases, we also have updates here. So we had the 24.02 release, then we had the 24.02.1 release, 24.02.2, and 24.02.3 release. If you realize now in this stream that you didn't upgrade your Azure Stack HCI version to 24.02.3, for example, you can do this in a single step. So there is not this timeline for the releases between. So it's your decision. It gives Microsoft the ability that Microsoft can bring new technologies to your environment, but it's your decision when you install it. My recommendation is to do it as soon as possible, because the way to install it is very easy. So when we look at one of my clusters here, when I go to the cluster list, I did this for, I don't have any clusters here. This is interesting. There should be some Azure Stack HCI clusters, 27 of them. So now they are here. It was only a refresh problem. So I have Azure Stack HCI cluster here where I did these updates already. And when I go to the Azure portal to updates, I can see this cluster is up to date. And I can see I have the history here. And this is a cluster where I didn't install all the updates when they were available. I installed this cluster several weeks or months ago. Then I migrated to 24.02.3. So this was the latest 24.02 version. And then I went directly to 24.05 because I wanted to have these new features we have in there. I didn't install 24.02.2 and 24.02.1 because I missed it on this demo system. I went directly to this version here. So it's your decision. My recommendation is to install all of these versions. This is the reason why we have this overview section in the Azure Stack HCI area, where we can see which cluster is missing which updates. So we can see here, okay, I have 3 of my 12 clusters that have updates available, where I should install the updates to bring them to the latest version. And regarding the functionality, one important thing that has changed in this 24.05 release, we have a new installation media now. Until 24.05, so since February till now, the situation is when we went to the Azure Stack HCI page, get started, and we downloaded Azure Stack HCI, then we received a version 23H2, but this was the release 23.11. So it was 23H2 release 23.11. So the old bits and bytes from the preview times. And we have seen this because when we started the deployment, one of the first steps was that the nodes were updated. So we did a deployment based on relatively old bits and bytes. And then the first thing was that the nodes were updated, and this took a lot of time because the node has to install updates, then reboot, depending on when we did it, several reboots. So exactly on this host, this was installed, I would say 4 or 6 weeks ago. I had to wait more than an hour for all of these updates. And now we have a installation media that has everything streamed inside already. So the delta is very small. So when we deploy Azure Stack HCI now, for sure it also checks for updates, but the updates that have to be installed, that they were released after this new version, are very small. So the deployment went very faster since we have the new installation media. As far as I know, the situation is that the systems that have Azure Stack HCI pre-installed, and these are the Premier solution and integrated systems, at the moment are not distributed or delivered with this latest update. So it takes a few days or maybe weeks till they have the latest bits and bytes on it. So if you install the system on your own, then everything is fine because you are sure you will go to the Azure portal, will download the latest version, and then you have the newest media. If you have an integrated system or a premier solution, my recommendation is to check the Azure Stack HCI version on the nodes before you start with the deployment, because in the deployment, we have changes for the 24.05 release. These are advantages, these changes we have, but I did not test on my own and I have no information what happens in the deployment exactly if I have old bits and bytes on the system and I start with a new deployment. So I would recommend to ensure that you have the latest bits and bytes on the machines. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a question here in the chat. How is update done? MS updates or deploy of new build? So if we start from the scratch, then we download this installation media here, and we have the latest version in the installation. If we have an existing Azure Stack HCI cluster, then we are using the updates area for the system. We have seen this on my machine a few minutes ago. And this is a change regarding compared to the previous Azure Stack HCI versions. There we used Windows Admin Center. Here in 23H2, we are also using the Azure portal for delivering the updates. And this works very, very well because every Azure Stack HCI cluster has a component that is called a lifecycle manager. So because when I'm talking about these updates that are driven by Azure, customers at the first moment are afraid what happens if something fails, if there is a disconnectivity in my internet. This is no problem because when we look at this server here, let's take this machine I'm using here, and let's look at the extensions, then every Azure Stack HCI cluster or node, this is a single node cluster, has the life cycle manager or LCM controller. And every deployment related change, so new deployment of Azure Stack HCI, installation of new update versions, and so on, is triggered by Azure, but the whole workflow is distributed to the lifecycle manager and then runs independently locally on the machine. So there's from the idea, there's no difference if I would do it with an automated PowerShell script on premises or with the lifecycle manager, which is based on the Azure technology. So my experience so far was really very, very good. So updates worked fine. Yes, I'm not any longer using these old tools, but it works well. And last thing that could be part of the question in the chat, if I'm installing an Azure Stack HCI cluster and start the deployment, and then the deployment realizes that updates are missing, then these updates are installed within the deployment process. And this is what I mentioned, why the deployment took so long the last weeks, because there were many updates available. And now beginning with 24.05, we have this new installation ISO file we can download, where we have the advantage that the delta with the updates is very small.
There's one more comment from Carl. That's a known issue list in 24.
This is correct. There's a fixed issue list and there's a known issue list. And it says there were issues with some hardware configurations in this new version. So it says if we already deployed successfully, there's nothing to do. And this new ISO is still functional. So it does not mean that Microsoft destroys this 24.05 version anyhow. But it says, oh yeah, there were some hardware configurations where there were deployment issues. And so they decided to keep on these machines the previous version, and this is the 2311. There are only two versions available, 2405 and 2311. I don't have details here about it, what the reason was, but usually these are driver or firmware things. So this means if you are using the 2311 version, then you will have the situation that you have what I described. The deployment starts and it realizes many updates are missing, and they are installed from the cloud. And if you are using the 2405 version, and I did this the last days, then we receive only the small delta. And on my configurations, I used it. It worked fine. So I don't have information on which machines it did not work successfully. So it's information that said on some hardware configurations. I assume this is because they added new checks here. So when you look at what was fixed or what was added, then we can see we have improved reliability when detecting firmware versions, here detecting ATC, network ATC configurations. And with this additional checks, maybe some hardware configurations were not compatible here. Yeah. This was added at a later point in time, so this is a relatively new extension here that the ISO for some hardware configurations was rolled back.
There's one more news these days, and Carl reposted it in the Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk group this morning, that Lenovo has something announced.
Yeah, Lenovo is now officially in the catalog with the Premier solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So we had this maybe in the last or in the session before, where my statement was, for me, it's a Premier solution when it's really in the catalog, or not when it's on the vendor website. But now it's really here in the catalog. So as we already mentioned in a previous show, also Lenovo is providing the Premier solution, and as you can see from the naming, the Premier solution is the solution with the deepest integration of Azure Stack HCI. So if you want to have a system where your tasks absolutely minimized, then you should choose such a Premier solution. I don't know if this is the official statement, but my impression is that these Premier solutions were released because I think 1 year ago, Microsoft introduced their own hardware on an Ignite conference. It was 2 years ago, where they said, oh, for special projects, now we have this hardware. As far as I know, this was never released, but maybe they had some learning from this hardware platform, because customers were asking about a solution where they have a single point of contact for the whole solution, not Microsoft for the software and Dell or Lenovo for the hardware, but to have Dell or Lenovo for the whole solution, for the hardware and the software, so Azure Stack HCI with the services on this. And this is the idea behind Premier solution. In a Premier solution, you always have the situation that you can get the full support from Microsoft, because Microsoft also can support in hardware cases, or you can have the full support from the hardware vendor. So you have from both sides access to the support, and both sides support the full stack, including hardware and software. Do we have to add something here, Sven, to the Premier solutions?
Not at the moment, no.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, because I'm often asked about this, when you look at the Premier solutions, here you have 4th generation Intel Xeon, here 4th generation Intel Xeon. The Lenovo solution is based on AMD EPYC, and I assume you know Intel 5th generation Xeon is already available, and 6th generation is announced. And here we can see an integrated system, and I'm pretty sure there are also validated nodes that have already this later version of Intel Xeon. As you can imagine, a validated solution, so let's say a solution that passed the base testing, is faster and easier to bring to the catalog than an integrated system that has additional services around it. And a Premier solution takes additional time because the Premier solution has the OS pre-installed, we have additional tools, we have additional services, and so on. And this takes some time. So the advantage of Premier solution is deepest integration, but maybe only a few configurations available. With the integrated system, you have a little bit broader market, and the validated solutions, there you can see overall we have more than 250 platforms. So it depends on your needs. Should it be a validated solution, an integrated system, or a Premier solution?
Good.
Okay.
So anything else you want to add beside the 2405, or should we go directly to these new functionalities?
I would say we can start with the new things in the version 24 H2, and maybe this also gives you an impression, that it makes sense to have this learn.microsoft.com page a little bit in the view to see when new versions are released, to see what are new functionalities, what are the fixed issues, and maybe what are the new issues. Carl mentioned the issue with the ISO and some hardware configurations. There's another issue I have seen already once that is also described in the documentation. In my portal, we have seen that an Azure Stack HCI node has several extensions. And these are the extensions here. 4 of them are by default. I've installed 2 additional extensions here on these nodes. And sometimes it might happen that within the deployment, 1 or more of these extensions are not installed. So my experience from the field is that if I wait for 30 or 60 minutes, usually they show up. So it needs some time till they are installed. If this does not happen, it's a good idea to look in the known issues, and you will find an article that this is a known situation, that this happens sometimes. And if this happens, you have an script here where you can address the specific extension and install it here. So, and you can do it manually, because for sure, if you have the support, if you, for example, have a Premier solution, you can contact your vendor, so Dell or Lenovo, or you can contact Microsoft. But if this is already known, this is the fastest solution to use the knowledge from the learn.com article and just deploy this extension and finalize the configuration.
Yeah, that's an important point, that it's important to understand that Azure Stack HCI is a product that is a modern life cycle. It's work in progress. So every day people are working on that solution to make it better, bigger, faster, new features, and so on. But this also means that things are changing. And so if you compare this with the Windows Server release, this is more or less for 3 years the same. Of course, there are some small fixes, but not a lot of them. And if you learn about Azure Stack HCI, so let's say version 21 H2, and think, okay, now I'm an expert about Azure Stack HCI, and try to do the things the same way as you did it 2 years ago, then you will run into a lot of issues. So it's super important, and this is what you mentioned, Manfred, very often, that whenever you, for example, deploy a cluster or do other things, you always look to the official Microsoft documentation prior your work and try to find out if something changed, or if there are some known issues, if there's something you have to prepare differently than you have to do this 2 weeks ago, to be safe that your deployment will run correctly. And a lot of other people are running into issues and say, okay, Azure Stack HCI has an issue, but very often the issue is not Azure Stack HCI, it's because something has changed and you have to do things differently. And with the current version of Azure Stack HCI, a lot of things are automated. So deployment is automated much more than in the past. And this is the strategy of Azure Stack HCI, to make things easier, automated, following best practices, that there are not so many options for our partners and customers to make mistakes, but we are on the way to make it so seamless as possible. But in the meantime, it makes sense to look at the documentations and to follow the agenda that is currently available.
Yeah, and to add something here, Sven, I also often see this because many customers are complaining and say, oh, something works not, especially regarding the deployment. And what I must say, I really have installed many of these Azure Stack HCI 23H2 clusters in the field already on different hardware. So I'm wondering about the statement that there were some issues with hardware in the latest release, because I already tested it on several configurations. And when you look at the deployment, from my point of view, this is one of the best documentations within learn.microsoft.com, because really every step within this deployment guide works as written. So it starts with the installation of the modules. It explains how to prepare the Active Directory. So if you do it next week as you ever did it, something might have changed. But if you always take the deployment guide, it's always up to date. Let's have a look when the last update was done. It was, okay, now 16th of March in the Prepare Active Directory. Let's see here, install OS. Here, a very new update from June, because in the installation, some things have changed. So it's really always up to date and as it works. If a new version is published, you can expect that usually within the next 24 hours, you have the latest version here. So for me, it always was a good experience to work through the deployment guide and do it as written, and not do it at I did it last time, because it's a hybrid service, Azure Stack HCI. So it's expected that things change. It's not a static system. And Carl had this additional question about the bits and bytes, where he says, now what's the situation? What do we get when we download it? I don't know what we get when we download it now. So, but when I click on download Azure Stack HCI, I will receive the same version that Carl receives with the download, and we will see it's the 23.10.04. So it's the old version that now comes with the download, but the statement is not you have to use this old version. The statement is there were some hardware vendors that had issues. And don't know which of them had the issues. So let's go to the news section. What's new? Where did I have it? I don't know which it was. I tested it on several hardware configurations and I didn't see this issue. So I had this new deployments, and I will use my 24.02 version also for the new deployments. Because they don't say, please don't use it anymore. So there are configurations know where they had issues. Maybe this is only one vendor where there were issues, and so it was rolled back to ensure if a customer is using this hardware that it will not expect any issues there. Yeah.
Okay. So what's new with
okay, what's new?
24.05?
Yeah, so these were some issues, smaller issues or larger issues, whatever you think. The thing what's really new is that let's see where it's written, we have now extensions to the update situation. So the system builder extensions were introduced together with Azure Stack HCI. The system builder extensions provide us driver and firmware updates for Azure Stack HCI. And we didn't have them really in the past. So they are now available from more and more hardware vendors. And there we have a PowerShell command now to update the solution builder extensions. And they can now be delivered via the Azure update at this point. So if you did not see any hardware related updates in the past, they will come now to more and more systems. Then I think you know that Azure Stack HCI is integrated into Active Directory, and there were some limitations in larger Active Directory environments. They have been addressed in this release. So if you had some limitations because you have a huge worldwide Active Directory infrastructure, then you should look again at Azure Stack HCI, because now it's possible at this point in time. Then we have the situation that nearly everything is done via the Azure Resource Manager. So when I deploy Azure Stack HCI, when I create new virtual machines and things like this, then we have an Azure Resource Manager template that is distributed to the Azure Arc Resource Bridge and deployed to the nodes. And this has been updated to optimize the experience in using this ARM templates. Then we know all is about security. And to ensure that the communication stays secure, we have a process that is called secret rotation. So where the secrets are updated on a regular basis, this has been improved. So if you have seen issues there, this now works optimized. I mentioned the system builder extensions. What actually is a little bit limited from the experience is the way to add nodes. We talked about this several times in the past. For sure, we can extend an Azure Stack HCI cluster with additional nodes. In the past, this was no problem because Azure Stack HCI was an on-premises system that was connected afterwards to Azure. Now it has this cloud-based deployment, and for sure, Azure needs to have some meta information about the new nodes. And the promise from Microsoft is that that adding nodes will be available from the Azure portal in the future. Today is a hybrid process. So this means we have still to prepare the server on premises, but then it's configured based on the network templates we already have, the network intents, and is added to the Azure Stack HCI cluster. I have seen many issues in the field with network configurations, and this is the reason why Microsoft extended the checks on the network. So maybe you know that Azure Stack HCI is using switch embedded teaming for teaming network interfaces, and they have to be absolutely identical. Everybody should know this, but Azure Stack HCI did not verify this. It checked if it's the same network interface card, but not if it's the same speed and so on. And this has been changed, that we have more detailed tests to ensure that even if somebody configures the system that has not the expected knowledge, we'll see a warning or error that this network configuration is not supported together with Azure Stack HCI. Then we have several updates and changes regarding the naming convention that is used. We mentioned the way how the updates are delivered. We mentioned already that we have the situation that updates are delivered by the Azure portal, and there the cluster-aware updating for sure is used. I receive this question often, if this is cluster-aware or if it's something different. But there were some issues in the past that this did not work exactly, because if we have cluster-aware updating, the workload has to be moved via live migration from one node to the other. Then the node is updated, then the workload moves back. This is a complex process, and this is optimized by this update now. Before we deploy Azure Stack HCI, or while we deploy Azure Stack HCI, there's an environment checker. This environment checker can be downloaded as a dedicated package if we want to check our environment before we plan for Azure Stack HCI. And the environment checker now includes additional checks. For example, for remote direct memory access, RDMA is still a thing that is not really complex, but many administrators are afraid of this, and in the field we really often see configuration issues here with RDMA. Now this is checked intensively based on the environment checker. Also the link speed of the network adapters, the drivers, if they are up to date, because for each network interface card there are specific driver recommendations and requirements to be fully supported with Azure Stack HCI. It also checks if I followed the IP address configuration things in the deployment guide. So I can read in the deployment guide that I should have only one IP address on the management network adapter, but now it's really checked if I did not misconfigure it. Then we have this part observability. Here we have the monitoring things and collection of logs. The very important thing is the Arc VM management, because this is the part where we have the big advantages in Azure Stack HCI. And Microsoft published 2 guides how to configure or create images for CentOS and Red Hat Linux for as VM images. Because when we go to an Azure Stack HCI cluster, let's do this in my portal here, we use this one here, then we have the virtual machine images, and these images are used for deploying new virtual machines. And we have 3 ways to provide images. The easiest way is from the Azure Marketplace. When I go to the Azure Marketplace, I have a list of images Microsoft is directly providing to me for download. This is Windows Server and Windows Client especially for Azure Virtual Desktop. But if I want to have different operating systems that are not listed in the Marketplace list that is provided to me here, then we have 2 options: from an Azure Storage account or from a local share. But if I use one of these options, I have the way how to bring the image to my image list. But for sure, I have to prepare the image first. I have to install the operating system, choose specific configurations. And for Windows Server, the last step is to sysprep the server to generalize it. And there are similar steps for Linux, and they are written in this Arc management guide for these 2 distributions. More Linux distributions will be added. To clarify, we have a huge list of supported Linux systems: SUSE Linux, CentOS, Red Hat, Oracle Linux, Ubuntu, and so on. So these are the first 2 distributions where Microsoft provides this guide how to configure an optimized image for deployment. If you are already familiar with this process, you don't need these guides. And if you want to use another Linux distribution and you are familiar with this step, then you don't need these guides. If you're somebody like Manfred that only knows Windows and does not really know Linux very well, then these guides are very, very helpful, because I can take them and have everything explained how to do it with a Linux operating system, which is not my typical platform I'm using. Then we have some changes in the portal. This is also a thing you have to keep in mind in such a hybrid solution. We are using the portal for all the configuration actions. We are using the portal for the deployment. So when we go to get started, deploy the cluster. We are using the portal for deploying new virtual machines. When I'm going to the cluster, when I go to virtual machines, I can create new virtual machines, logical networks, and so on. And for sure, in this portal, there are changes on a regular basis. One change I didn't like is that now we have these categories that are not expanded by default. This one was one of these portal changes. This was only an optical change. I don't really like it, but it's the situation now, so I have to expand these areas when I want to work. But there are portal changes where Microsoft says this might, this is important that the customer really knows what has changed there. For example, in the past, we had a retry button in the deployment. It's now renamed to resume, because it was never a retry, it was always a resume. It continued the deployment that was already started. So for you, it's important. This did not change the process, but the product group said, moment, what is written there does not really explain what happens. So this could be misleading. Then the resources for the cluster deployment are now locked by default. You will realize this if you do test deployments and you want to delete the items, and then you will realize, oh, they are locked. I have to unlock them before I can delete them. And we have a new behavior of deleting Arc server resources. So when we delete an Azure Stack HCI cluster, then this is an additional step. This happened because I was surprised when I heard this, but it seems really that it happened, that there were customers in the field that removed nodes from an Azure Stack HCI cluster. And because they had some issues and they thought, if I remove the node, then everything is good again. But removing a node from the cluster should be the last thing we do when we tested everything else. And so Microsoft said, okay, if a customer thinks about this, we will ensure that the Arc resources stay in Azure. So when the server comes back, because it was a failure to remove the node, then the Arc resources can be used again. So many small changes. The major changes with the OS version and the deployment experience from my point of view.
Cool. And a lot of things about Azure Kubernetes services.
Yeah.
So there's an extra session for these. But yeah.
Yeah. This is also to add some words here. So AKS on Azure Stack HCI is a service on Azure Stack HCI that follows an own life cycle somehow. So this means even if we don't have a new Azure Stack HCI version, it might happen that we have new AKS features there. It's a service on Azure Stack HCI that uses the Azure Stack HCI platform, but that can release new features without needing a new Azure Stack HCI version here. Yeah.
So maybe we should have an AKS show. So many things are happening there, and an Azure Arc show. Oh, you have Azure Arc show with Alexander Ott already.
Yeah,
so many shows, and today's show is already at the end. So we walked through all the new features and bug fixes. We explained how they impact our business, that it makes sense to have a look at the official documentation whenever you are doing significant changes or whenever you try to set up a new cluster. So hopefully this landed for today. And so we are closing our today's session, and I would switch to my screen to highlight when we are planning the next session. It's not in 2 weeks as usually, it's in 4 weeks. So 4 weeks, we have the new fiscal year of Microsoft. It's starting beginning of July. So hopefully in 4 weeks, there are some new announcements we can talk about. If not, we will find a relevant topic for you, hopefully. But yeah, 4 weeks are a lot of time and a lot of things can happen. So please bookmark that in July 5th, we will be back again. And yeah, as I promised at the beginning of the session, here's the URL for my Azure Stack HCI website. It's svenlangenfeld-techtalk.com. This is the page where you find everything I'm aware of for Azure Stack HCI. So useful links, documentations, presentations, videos, hardware-related topics, and there's a special section for Windows Server 2025. So if you are interested in that content, so please visit this website as well. And at the beginning, I also highlighted the Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk on LinkedIn. So at the moment, we are at 999 members. So one more is missing. So if you follow this community on LinkedIn, we will reach the 1,000 and celebrate this in our next Azure Stack HCI show, because on this LinkedIn channel you will find all the relevant news, new content, new presentations, new videos, a lot of cool Azure Stack HCI experts all around the world are posting on this LinkedIn channel. So please be part of this community. I would be very happy to have you with us. And then there's the hybrid show this morning at 10 a.m. German time. Eric and Manfred talked about the Copilot Plus PCs. Very interesting hybrid show. And the next one will be in 4 weeks. So
Yes.
not in 2 weeks as usually, in 4 weeks, same date as the Azure Stack HCI show. Correct, Manfred?
No, we have a little longer break here for the hybrid show. The next hybrid show is in August because Eric is on holidays.
Oh.
So
Who approved that?
I think the 2nd of August.
2nd of August. Okay.
So the first Friday in August is our next session. Yeah.
Sounds good. And the on-prem show. You have a show with Carsten Raffal, another MVP, and this is focusing on on-prem, and it's today, 3 p.m. What is the topic of today's on-prem show?
3 p.m. today, German language. We are talking about lessons from the field about Azure Stack HCI. So Carsten is deploying often Azure Stack HCI. I'm deploying very often Azure Stack HCI clusters. And we are talking a little bit about our experiences from the field, where you have to care about what things, where you have to look especially at it, where they have been maybe issues, or where you will see issues if you don't follow the guidelines. And this is our topic today.
Okay, perfect. German language. And if you do not want to miss anything, the Windows Business Solution Club calendar is something you can upload into your calendar. And there's a how-to guide at manfredhelber.de/calendar. And yeah, if you do not want to miss anything, please download this guide, how to include the Windows Business Solution Club calendar with all the things Manfred and we are doing is part of your calendar. And if you go to manfredhelber.de/newsletter, then you will receive the newsletter. Manfred is sending this newsletter once a week, roundabout, with all the relevant events and so on. So please do this as well. So that's it for today. We are at the end of the hour. We are very close to weekend. I would like to say goodbye. I wish you a very nice weekend. Hopefully the sun is shining, and see you next week on any other platform we are offering. Manfred, have a nice weekend as well. And the last famous words are yours as well, always.
maybe we will see us in at 3 p.m. On YouTube for the on-prem show. And I wish you also a nice weekend, and till the next Azure Stack HCI show in 4 weeks.
In 4 weeks, yeah. Bye.